Well, hello everyone. Welcome to part 2 of this fabulous series that we titled The Quran's Money Problems. With me here in the studio, Dr. Jay Smith, whom we've introduced last time, and many of you know who Dr. Jay Smith. He is an apologist and a polemist also in the field of Islam. And Dr. Jay, once again, we are so excited to have you here.
Hey, it's good to be here again.
Last time we did give an overview about why basically focusing on the Quran is important. And even though you mentioned the focus is on the book, that's the Quran, the man, that's Muhammad, and even the one God. I like that. But this particular part of our shows, we are going to zoom in on that particular book simply because Muslims in general assume it to be a perfect book, complete book, a preserved book in heaven, and so on and so forth. But what do the scholars actually say about this?
Well, we need to go to what the scholars are saying and what the leaders, and not all of them are scholars, but what the leaders are saying. Let's put up on the slide the first man up here, Fethullah Gulen, who is in the news quite a bit right now.
That's
in
right.
fact, he lives in my state, in the United States, in Pennsylvania. And he says the Quran text is entirely reliable. It has not been altered, edited, or tampered with since it was revealed. All Muslims know only one Quran, perfectly preserved in its original words since the Prophet's death when revelation ended. Now that's quite a statement to stay right there.
And Muslims will take this and run to the bank with it.
Absolutely. And I don't know of any Muslim that wouldn't disagree with that, except possibly your liberal Muslims.
That's right.
But he's not the only one. Let's look at the next slide. Suzanne Hanif, she is a convert. She says the Holy Quran is the only divinely revealed scripture in the history of mankind, which has been preserved to the present time in its exact original form.
I like her honesty that at least there are other books, but somehow God overlooked the preservation of the other books, and this is the only one he took the time to preserve.
It's fascinating because that does not agree with the Quran.
That's right.
We have 4 references in the Quran. Chapter 4, verse 82, Surah 4, Ayah 82, chapter 6, Ayah 114, or Surah 6, 114, chapter 16, verse 89, and chapter 41, verse 3, all talk about the fact that the Quran is not changed.
That's right.
They do say that it is clear. Let me repeat that. I correct that. It's not that it's not been changed, that it is clear and understandable.
In Arabic, sometimes they will say. And
This
yes,
idea of preservation does not exist in the Quran itself. So the Quran does not make this claim for itself.
in fact, the Quran even claimed to preserve the other books as well. Muhaiminan alayha is to protect it.
There you go.
Yeah.
And we see that. We know that if Muslims have any question, they're to go to the
people
earlier
of the book.
scriptures,
That's right.
chapter 10, verse 94, chapter 21, verse 7 says that.
That's right.
Come to the people of the scripture, the Ali Kitab, that's us. We're the Christians and the Jews,
Correct.
because we have been given the Tawrat and the Injil for them.
That's correct.
Chapter 4, verse 136 says that both the earlier scriptures and the Quran were given to Muslims.
Correct. And it speaks clearly that it was given by Allah, basically.
By Allah.
The Word of God, by
For
God
both
himself.
Christians and Muslims.
Exactly.
I love chapter 29, verse 46. This is one of my favorites. It says there, do not dispute with the Christians.
That's right.
They're not even to dispute with us about this fact.
Right.
I love that, and I use that all the time at Speaker's Corner. Hey, guys, read your own scripture. You're not supposed to be arguing with me on this one.
Absolutely.
And then chapter 5, verse 46 and 47, and verse 68 are probably the clearest for us, that we are to go back to our scriptures, that we're to measure what we meet by our own scriptures.
That's correct. And
You can't get more clear than that.
And you have nothing to stand on, basically, except your scripture. Yes.
There is not one verse, and I've asked this for about 35 years, there is not one verse in the Quran that says our Bible has been corrupted.
Absolutely. And I will challenge any sincere Muslim to show me where did the Quran say the Bible as a book has been
In
corrupted.
fact, we can do a whole episode on that, and we will do that.
Absolutely.
We're going to do that in our apologetics. But that certainly what you see Suzanne Hanif saying here is not supported by the Quran. But let's go on. Let's see what else someone has to say. Let's look at Abdullah Yusuf Ali. Now, Abdullah Yusuf
famous
Ali,
translator.
He's the famous translator from Pakistan. He did his translation in 1935. Look and see what he says. So well has it been preserved, that's the Quran, both in memory and in writing, that the Arabic text we have today is identical to the text as it was revealed to the Prophet Muhammad. Not even a single letter has yielded to corruption during the passage of the centuries.
Right there, this statement by Abdullah Yusuf Ali has killed the Quran already
Already.
because of what we know.
They put the Quran on such a high pedestal. And this he should know. I mean, he's the one that did the translation.
That's
The
right.
most famous translation we use in the English language today is his.
Correct.
And he's
Correct.
not the only one. Let's look at another one. Let's look at Maulvi Muhammad Ali. This is the Ahmadiyya community. This is their cleric. This is their sage. And he says this: the Quran is one, and no copy differing in even a diacritical point is met with. Now, explain diacritical part. What is this? What are they talking
Well,
about here?
basically, it's a Semitic language. You have to put markations and pointings to be able to pronounce the word and even understand the word. Just by virtue of doing this, you can take one word and come up with more than 30 plus meanings.
Yeah.
And he's saying,
Depending on where the dots are above and below the
exactly,
line.
and the markations and
We're
the
going to
vowel
be talking
markings
about
and everything.
that when we get to the 31
So,
Qurans.
once again, sadly, statements like this by so-called self-proclaimed scholars is why my Muslim people are not really following the truth.
He goes on and says, there are and always have been contending sects, but the same Quran is in the possession of one and all. A manuscript with the slightest variation in the text is unknown. Ooh, what a statement to make.
You and I know already of 6 of them.
We're going to have a great time. And in some ways, by virtue of even just putting, and we need Muslims to see this. These are your scholars, Muslims. These are your leaders who are saying this. We're not saying this. We're showing you who they are. We're showing you what they're saying. And then we're going to ask whether you can support what they're saying, especially after these episodes. And let's then move on now to another one. And this is Dr. Shabir Ali. He's a good friend of mine. I've known him now since 1997. Dr. Shabir Ali has been a good friend. We've had 6 debates together. And he said this. This is in a debate that he was having with Tony Costa, another good friend from Toronto. And he says to Tony, pointed out that we have a copy of the Quran dating from 790 in the British Museum. That is the Ma'il Quran. That's the manuscript known as the 2165 manuscript, which is in the British Library right now. And it's no longer in the museum. Folks, that's 1,300 years ago. And we can compare that with what we're reading today, and we find them to be exactly identical. Ooh, man, now that's amazing that he said this. Now, he said this back in the 1990s and the early 2000s. He
Is
no
he willing
longer
to back
says
it up
this today.
anymore?
He cannot say this anymore today. But I want you to put that quote up there. Shabir Ali goes on and says in another quote, and we'll put that on the screen, but what is important to notice is that throughout the ages of Muslim history, the Muslims have not quarreled over what is the text of the Quran, because the text was known through memory work and through written materials. So both memory and written materials, he's saying, that's why we know what it is today. Handed down right from the time of the Prophet Muhammad, peace and blessings of God be upon him. As I said, this is Shabir Ali speaking, the 2 copies that were made 1,400 years ago, now he's moved it back to 1,400 years. Remember,
From
the previous
1300,
word
yeah.
is 1,300.
Yeah.
One which is in Tashkent, Russia.
That's a Samarkand one.
Now, Tashkent is not in Russia, so he made that mistake. Tashkent is in Uzbekistan.
That's right.
And that's a Samarkand, as you said. That's a Samarkand manuscript. Has been demonstrated by Ahmed van Denver in his book Ulum al-Quran to be an early copy from that time, and we find no difference from that copy to what we're reading today.
I have looked at every single image of the manuscript of Samarkand, and I can tell you there is a lot of questions in there.
We're going to have a great time when we get to it. But can you see why these quotes, we need to put them up there. Muslims need to know what their scholars are saying, have been saying, and what they are still, in some cases, still saying today. Be careful the claims you make. We're going to hold now Yusuf Ali, and we're going to hold also Shabir Ali and the others who have Fethullah Gulen. We're going to hold them to account and see if they can support these quotes after we get done with these episodes.
That's right. That's right. And that's why we are doing what we're doing, me and Dr. J. Smith. In fact, today we're going to start basically by talking about the traditional view on the compilations of the Quran, which is 2 of those. Why don't you take us there?
What is our remit? What is it we're going to get? Let's put the slide up, and this is what I want everybody to. This is what we're going to do, Al. We want to attempt to not criticize Muslims for saying what they're saying. We are going to say that there is going to be some critical now. We're not here just to criticize Muslims. What we're here to do is criticize these claims. We cannot critique the uncreated or sent down. There's no way you can critique that because that's nothing more than a claim that is not provable or disprovable. We can only critique an archaic, complete, and unchanged Quran. Thus, these are the four things we're going to be critiquing. Number one, we want to find one Quran, just one.
Correct.
I would love to find 6. Should be able to find 9, as we're going to see later on. But if they could even provide one Quran, if the Muslims, those of you who are watching, if you could just provide us with one Quran dated from the mid-7th century, okay?
So that's around the time of Uthman.
I don't want an 8th century Quran. I don't want a 9th century Quran. I want a 7th century Quran. Because this is the claim they make. And not only that, Muslims have to come up with the Quran from the 7th century, because we're only talking about 1400 years ago. Listen, you come to the British Library in London, and I'll show you the Sinaiticus, which is from the 4th century.
That's right.
4th century. That's 300 years earlier. If we can provide you an entire in this case, the entire New Testament from the 4th century, right next to it, in the glass cabinet next to it, is the Alexandrinus, which is the entire Old and New Testament from the 5th century. If you were to go down to Rome, you'll get the Vaticanus, which is, again, from the early to mid 4th century, 300 years before the 7th century. If we can come up with 3 metropolitan codices
Complete.
of the Bible and the New Testament alone,
Yeah.
then from 300 years earlier,
How
I
come
would
we
like
can't find the
Muslims to come
Quran?
up with just one.
300 years after that time.
That's right. We're talking.
Where
we're
the
asking,
preservation process would have been much even better and improved.
and that's where. So we want one Quran dated from the mid 7th century, really from 652. Why do I say 652?
Because the time of Uthman.
That's Uthman. That's the time that Uthman compiled the Quran, and we're going to look at Al-Bukhari, Hadith number 6. Volume number 6, Hadith number 509 and 510. We're going to unpack those two because that's where the claims are made. See, every one of these Muslims that are making these claims have to go back to that original text.
That's correct.
Oh, did I say original? Excuse me. I would like to believe it is original. We're even going to show that that's a problem, but when we get there, we'll unpack that. Now let's go back to the slide again, so we're looking for one Quran dated from the mid 7th century that is complete. That means it has all 114 surahs. All right? Not just 23 or 43 or 26.
Right.
We want to see all 114 surahs. And that those 114 surahs are unchanged. Exactly like the Quran that I have right here in my hand.
I wonder if we discover that Quran, that it will really have 114 surahs, because just right at that time, we have Ibn Mas'ud and Ubay arguing whether it's 112 or 116.
You're right. So even amongst the 4 metropolitan codices, we have a discrepancy. Ubay ibn Ka'b, his Quran became famous in Damascus.
Right.
Ibn Mas'ud's, his manuscript
Kufa.
became very famous in Baghdad. Ibn Musa, his codex became famous in Basra. And then Zayd ibn Thabit. Those 4 right there. The discrepancies between those 4. I think it was Dr. Arthur Jeffries back in the 1930s, the British, or is the Australian professor. He then went and looked at all of these discrepancies from within the traditions, the Islamic traditions, and he found 15,000 differences between these 4 codices. So this has been
That's
known
the
about since the
preserved book.
1930s.
15,000 in a preserved book that has no errors in it.
Fascinating. So those are the 4. Back to that, before we move on, let's look at that. What we're looking for, Al, one Quran from the mid 7th century, complete and unchanged. Ooh, I love this. So we have a lot to get through, but we're going to do it.
Absolutely. I'm thinking maybe we should start next show by talking about the compilation, simply because I want us to take our time to analyze and critique this process, the
Brilliant.
traditional
Let's do
approach
that.
and things
And
like
let's
that.
start with the 2 compilations, the 2 different recensions.
And absolutely, what we're talking about is the first recension is around Abu Bakr's time, which took place probably 634, between 632 and 634 AD. And then the second recension that you've heard during Uthmanic time would have been around 650 to 652. And these are the traditional views that Muslims hold to. And in fact, they will go even further and will state that these early manuscripts that Dr. J have just alluded to, the claim is that at least 2 of them, if not even more, were the Uthmanic, basically, or copies of the Uthmanic recension, which once you look at the scholarly reviews of these manuscripts, you begin to discover immediately that no scholar in the right mind can make statements like this based on the evidence that they have discovered.
Yeah.
Well, Dr. J, again, we're so excited to have you here, and we're so excited about the kind of material that we are going to unpack for our viewers. Until we meet again, we wish our viewers a blessed day. Thanks for watching. Make sure to like and subscribe so that you don't miss future videos. And please consider becoming a patron on patreon.com/Sierra International.